Hey guys, Andrew here, and I'm going to be answering the first question on the group now, which is from Tim Hordo. So thanks, Tim, for the question. It's about coloring versus black and white. He asks, are there any special considerations to keep in mind when deciding if I should have the illustrations colored? So that's part one. Is there a generally preferred route when it comes to coloring versus black and white for single issues and or graphic novels? So this is a great question, and so I'll start with the first part of the question, which is, are there any special considerations to keep in mind? And I would say not exactly. There are a couple things to be aware of, but my short version of my answer is going to be basically do whatever is best for your story and for your art. Um, and things will generally work out, I think. But the biggest thing that's going to be different is going to be cost. So I'll get into that. I actually have two quotes for some books that I ordered last year. And so these are as similar as I could find because I've never really done a direct comparison where, there's two books with the exact same specs. One is black and white, one is color. So I have not done that, but these are as close as I can get. I think one is 7 by 10, the other is 8 by 10. So the trim size won't make a big difference because they're being cut from the same size sheet anyway. So the original paper size is the same. They're both hardcover, both generally same paper stock. So this is as close as I could get. And I've got much better prices nowadays because I'm printing directly in Asia, but this should hopefully give a good idea. So this book was called The Amazing Camel Toe, which is kind of a funny, radical feminist graphic novel. And we still have some of those available. And anyway, so we're looking at the quantity of 1,000. So on this book, it was $6.06. And then, so I think I have the cover here just to show you. So cover is in color. There was 1 or 2 pages in color, but the rest was all black and white. And this was 120 pages. And then we have this other book, which is all talk, which this was a full color and also hardcover, roughly the same trim size. So a lot of the specs were the same. And so you can see 1,000, the quantity was $7.22. Now this is Canadian dollars, so it's a little bit higher. And US is a little bit lower. So you can see there, 722. Let's do the quick math. Okay, so for the same quantity, that's roughly about 20% cheaper in this case. In some cases, again, if the quantity was increased, then that's a situation where you're going to be able to realize even more significant difference between black and white and color. And the reason for that, I think, is when you're looking at smaller quantities, like 300 to 500 copies, a lot of the cost of that is actually going to be in the labor. So it's going to be the setup of the plates that are used in offset printing. With digital is a bit different, but we're talking about traditional offset printing here. So just the setup is pretty significant. And so at that point, it doesn't make a huge difference if it's black and white or color, because as I said, most of that expense is in the labor. As you get into higher and higher quantities, 2,000 and 3,000, then the materials start to become a more significant part of the overall expense. And then so if you're just using black ink, it's going to be significantly cheaper. And I think you could get up to probably 50% cheaper in some cases at those higher quantities. So anywhere between 20 to 50% cheaper. And there's another special consideration I would say with black and white is that, and this is something a good printer can help you with this. If you send over artwork that's in 4 colors, so this looks like it's all black and white, right? And so I have a couple other examples I'm going to look at. But this looks like it's in black and white, but when you use the eyedropper tool and then you look at the color that's being used to create this black, so we have C, that's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So we have different values for each of these. If this is pure black, what you should see is 0, 0, 0, and 100 on pure black. There's a couple advantages to having your artwork set up in pure black, and it can be converted, so it's not the end of the world if it is set up in 4-color black. But some of the advantages here, well, better print clarity. I've had this issue once before with a book where all of the text was set up in 4-color. It wasn't really caught, and so because the text is it's rather small, and when the printer is trying to render all of this, it has 4 colors. So if you look really closely, it's pixelated and a bit blurry, the edges. So it's not very sharp. Most of the time, I think all the time, really, the text, even if your comic is black and white, the text should be set up on a different layer, which is all 100% black. So that's going to make sure that the lines, the edges are really crisp and clear. But again, so it's less of a concern than if your book is 100% black and white, because I can easily this book was 100% black and white, I can just have that converted over to 100% black pretty easily. You do have to watch for quality issues on the output file, make sure everything looks good. But yeah, so that's another special consideration. So when it comes down to, I think I'm going to look at the second part of the question, if I have it here, which is there a generally preferred route when it comes to coloring versus black and white for single issues and or graphic novels? The only thing I would say about whether there's a preferred route or not would be when it comes down to price, because the retailers, they will be more hesitant to take on a graphic novel, especially in the what we call the direct market, which is comic shops. And then so the other market is the book market. So the bookstores like Barnes and Noble and indie bookstores and so forth. Those are two separate markets in the eyes of distributors like Diamond. So when it comes to the direct market, which we're talking about comic shops, that's on a non-returnable basis. So it means that when the comic shop orders from Diamond, if they later cannot sell that book, they can't return it to Diamond. Those are the terms they have. And so when something has a higher price point, they're going to be somewhat more hesitant to take on that title. So that's the only real consideration. So, if you're doing a full color title, you might have the price set a little bit higher to cover your costs. And in that case, if you're talking about 200-page graphic novel, again, you see the higher the page count goes up, the more significant the difference in cost and price for the end customer is going to be. And so that's the only real consideration there. The only other thing I'd say is it comes down to the style of the artwork, and ultimately should do what's best for the story and for the art. So if you have, like, this is from Jameson O'Done, who's done a couple books with us, one of which is My First Pandemic. The other one is Last Starry Night, which is full color. But My First Pandemic, there's a lot of detail here and a lot of lines. So if you have an artist where the line work is very intricate and detailed, this is the type of thing where you can usually get away with a black and white book. Whereas if you have a book that's a little bit lighter on the line work, then you're probably going to need color to enhance that. So let's take one more look at another book, which is called Gina Modigliani. You can see very intricately detailed line work in this book. And so this works absolutely without any color at all. And this is actually one of the panels that has probably the least amount of detail. But you have panels like this as well, where we have night scenes, a lot of detail here. So it already works with black and white. No need for color here. In fact, color layered on to this richly detailed artwork is probably going to be too distracting. And that's actually one of the issues with the cover, which maybe I'll bring that up. Okay, so here's the cover of this book, the French version. And you can see that there's color layered on to this cover. That's just to create something a little bit more eye-catching, but I find it doesn't actually work that well with this art style. This is just my personal opinion, but I think with this case, it's because we have a lot of detail in the line work, and this is a darker story as well. And I think in general, the more serious, the darker the tone of the story, the more it's going to lend itself to black and white. Whereas, let's take a look at this example, which is from Animals Rule This Land, which is a book by Luke Milton, Australian playwright and now creator of graphic novels. So we're going to be doing the second one with him in the summer. And you can see, like, this type of artwork, because it doesn't have a lot of detailed line work. It's really, it's cartoon style. So we're talking about outlines of characters. This is something that really benefits from color, and it provides the contrast and it makes it easier to read, but it also just makes it more fun, more dynamic to look at. So if we layer back on the color, make sure I got it all here. Okay, you can see it makes a big difference, right? So I think, there may be other things to think about. That's what I think about. Like, I do get excited, to be honest, when there's a book that comes to my inbox that's all black and white, because I know I'm going to be able to save money on the print run. And I personally haven't found huge difference in the perceived value of a book based on whether it's black and white or color. I find that people tend to focus more on the story and the production quality, and the page count is an important thing. But and it's certainly an argument to be made. If you have a thicker graphic novel and it's full color, then it's easier to make the case for a higher price point, but I haven't found yet that it makes a big difference when it comes down to price. And so maybe I will. I haven't really done a lot of testing around that, but maybe it'll turn out to be the case when it comes to perceived value. But so far, when I have a black and white book, I tend to price it like a few dollars lower, but nothing really significant, probably $2 to $5 lower than I would the equivalent color book. Funny enough, those two books that I showed at the beginning, I did price the black and white one about $5 cheaper, so about $24.99 compared to the color book All Talk, which I priced at $29.99, and they did sell about the same quantity, about 1,000 copies each. So that might be interesting to know. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. And any other thoughts about this, please leave them in the comments. I'm sure there are probably other considerations that I haven't taken into account.